3 episodes left, one synopsis, and a title that I don't think is an accident. Radio airs this Friday, and before it does, I want to actually dig into what's likely coming, using everything the show and its cast have said on the record, rather than just repeating the one confirmed sentence Apple TV gave us. This is a speculation video. I'm going to tell you clearly what's theory and what's fact the whole way through, because I don't think you should walk into this episode with false certainty about anything. Let's start with what we actually know. The official synopsis. Juliet sends Lucas and Kennedy on a mission as a desperate Camille threatens Robert to tell the truth. That's it. That's the confirmed plot. Now let's build out from there. First, Lucas and Kennedy. We know from episode 6 that the algorithm already told Camille the real purpose of sending them to Silo 17. It was never actually about rescuing the children left behind. It was cover engineered specifically to get 2 loose ends out of the way permanently. Juliet doesn't know that yet. She thinks she's sending 2 men on a rescue mission she personally believes in, which means when this episode says she sends them, I think we're watching her walk them directly into a trap she has no idea exists. The show has already told the audience something Juliet doesn't know, and that gap is exactly the kind of dramatic irony this series loves to sit inside for as long as it possibly can. And there's real history here worth remembering. Silo 17 isn't an empty ruin. We know from season 2 that Solo, real name Jimmy Conroy, survived alone there for years, and that other people eventually turned up too. Teenagers, one of whom claimed to have killed him at one point, though he survived that too. Silo 17 has never been safe. If Lucas and Kennedy make it there, I don't think the danger is only coming from whatever the algorithm has planned. I think the location itself is already hostile before anyone's hidden hand gets involved. The episode title is doing a lot of work too. Radio almost certainly connects to Martha's discovery from episode 5, that all 50 silos share the same radios, just tuned to different frequencies, and that hers can now be used to talk without Silo 1 listening in, as long as the messages stay short. If Lucas and Kennedy are heading towards Silo 17, establishing radio contact first would make enormous tactical sense before anyone actually walks in blind. Juliet knows that silo better than almost anyone left alive in Silo 18. Reaching Solo or the surviving children over the radio before sending 2 men through the door could give them critical information nobody else has access to. That's my best supported theory for what this episode is actually built around structurally. Communication as the setup for the physical mission still to come. I also think there's a real chance radio isn't only about Silo 18's side of the story. This show has run 2 connected timelines all season, and the Before Times half has been circling its own version of hidden communication for weeks now. Daniel and Helen ended episode 5, discovering that Per Stenson, the world's most prominent advocate for AI control, was aboard the Nimitz the night of Operation Righteous Vengeance, right before their car started driving itself. If a title like Radio is going to apply to both halves of this season's structure, it's worth asking whether Daniel and Helen make contact with something or someone over an actual radio or transmission themselves this episode, especially given how much of their storyline has revolved around intercepted signals, off-the-record sources, and information nobody's supposed to have access to. I don't have confirmation either way, but the show has been disciplined all season about making its dual timelines rhyme with each other structurally, and I'd genuinely be surprised if this title only applied to one half of the story. Now, Camille and Robert. This is where I think the season's real emotional center is sitting right now, and where the cast themselves have given us the clearest roadmap for what's coming. Common, who plays Robert Sims, gave an interview back in July laying out exactly where his character's head is at this season. He described watching the head of IT position go to his own wife instead of him. The powers that be gave that position to Camille and told me to get out of the room. Now you find Sims in a place where everything that he has been believing in his whole life, everything he's worked for, has been kind of taken away. Common went further, saying that rejection is expected to drive Sims's arc for the rest of the season, even towards something like redemption, and that Sims is now, in Common's own words, hell-bent on finding out the truth about Silo 18's government. Common also confirmed directly that this obsession is expected to strain his marriage to Camille even further. So when the synopsis says Camille is desperate and threatens Robert to tell the truth, I think there are genuinely two different truths that could be on the table, and the episode might be building toward both colliding at once. One is personal and immediate. Does Robert know Bernard is still alive? Does he know what actually happened that night? Has he been lying to her face for weeks? The other is much bigger, and it's a mystery the show has openly acknowledged it hasn't answered yet. The season 3 premiere teased something called The Founders, and there's an unrevealed master silo sitting behind everything we've seen so far that the show has confirmed exists but has not shown us. If Robert has genuinely been digging into the truth about Silo 18's government, the way Common describes, it's entirely possible that what Camille is trying to force out of him isn't just a marital secret. It might be the first real thread pulling toward whoever's actually running this entire system. There's also a domestic thread I think this episode is likely to escalate rather than resolve. Anthony, Camille, and Robert's son, was caught stealing credits and lying about it last episode, and Camille was already furious that Robert tried to smooth it over with authority instead of actually parenting him. She's also confronted Robert directly about having her followed, and she's already gone to the algorithm herself alone, admitting she feels like she's failing simultaneously as a wife, a mother, and the head of IT. If Camille is desperate enough this episode to threaten her own husband outright, I think that admission to the algorithm last week was the actual breaking point building toward it, not a separate isolated moment. A woman that overwhelmed doesn't need one more secret to push her over the edge. She just needs one more lie confirmed. I also want to bring in a smaller thread that I think could matter more than it looks. Paul Billings and Hank have been quietly chasing down who's been stealing from Critical Supply, and their best lead points toward Knox's own estranged father, a man with a known reputation for stealing drill bits to sell on the black market. If that investigation connects to Orla Kent's death the way Paul suspects, and if it intersects at all with Shirley and Knox heading out on the Silo 17 mission instead of Lucas and Kennedy, which was actually Juliet's original plan before Camille overruled it. There's real tension sitting in the fact that Shirley and Knox are now expecting a child, and Knox already made her promise that if something happens to him in the field, she keeps moving instead of trying to save him. That promise was made before we knew for certain who was actually being sent out. If any part of that mission touches Knox's family history through his father, this episode has a lot of quiet, personal weight sitting underneath the larger conspiracy plot. I also want to mention that there's real active fan theorizing happening around this exact question right now, There's YouTube content specifically built around predicting what happens with Robert Sims's death and Camille's arc heading into these final episodes. I haven't verified the specific claims in that content, and I'm not going to repeat them as fact, but I think the fact that fans are already circling the idea of Sims dying tells you something about how fragile his position feels heading into this stretch of the season. A man who's lost the job he built his whole identity around, whose wife no longer trusts him, and who's now actively investigating the system he used to serve without question, is not a man this show is likely to let walk away clean. Here's what I want to be careful about, though. I came across at least one article online claiming to lay out the full ending of Season 3, including specific plot details from episodes that haven't aired yet. I'm not repeating any of that here, because the season doesn't actually finish until September 4, and I have no way to verify that content reflects anything real, rather than speculation dressed up as certainty. If you see videos or articles promising to tell you exactly how this season ends before episode 7 has even aired, I'd treat that with real skepticism. So here's my honest, clearly labeled prediction for radio. I think we open on Juliet and Martha working the radio, trying to reach Silo 17 before Lucas and Kennedy physically go anywhere, possibly making contact with Solo or someone else who survived there. I think Lucas and Kennedy do end up heading out on that mission, regardless of what the radio turns up, walking straight into whatever the algorithm has actually arranged for them, without either of them knowing it. I think Camille's confrontation with Robert escalates past anything we've seen between them so far, pulled forward by both Anthony's stealing incident and her own quiet breakdown in front of the algorithm last episode. And I think what he finally admits, if he admits anything, is going to be only part of the truth, enough to wound her, not enough to fully explain what he actually knows about the founders or the master silo. I also think there's a real chance the Before Time storyline gets its own version of radio contact this episode, given how closely this season has mirrored its two timelines against each other all season. And I think this episode ends with the season's remaining 3 episodes suddenly feeling a lot shorter than they did an hour earlier. Silo Season 3, Episode 7, Radio, premieres Friday, August 14, at midnight Pacific on Apple TV+. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Lucas and Kennedy already know they're walking into a trap, or are they completely blind to it? And do you think Robert Sims survives long enough to actually find whoever's really behind all of this? Because after everything Common has said about where his character's head is at right now, I honestly don't think this ends well for him.